Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, whether you're tuning in on the radio dial here in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM. We welcome you. Also, those joining us through our online affiliates around the world. We're glad to have all of you with us as well. You know, I always love finding out about new books, and our next guest I actually found out about because of a repeat guest on this program, best-selling author Matt De La Pena. He had posted about a book called The Stars Beneath Our Feet by author David Barclay Moore. Now, I, being the nerd that I am, I then reached out to David's publicist after reading the book and was able to set up now this conversation with him. We're going to talk to David not only about the book, but also what it's been like for him to see the early response to it, but also the themes that the book kind of tackles. It's a book that's perfect, I think, you know, for those in the teen area, but also I think us adults can learn a lot as well, not only about the journey of the main character, but also how in life, how we can be able to build the life that we want, even from places that may seem broken and fractured. We'll talk to David about some of those themes. If you're just not hearing about the book, we'll tell you at the end of our segment how you can get it for yourself. But David, hello to you and welcome to the program.
Hello, Cyrus, and thank you for having me, and hello, Mississippi and the world.
Well, look, I really appreciate this time. As I said, I heard about the book, actually, David, because of Matt De La Pena. I've had an opportunity to have him on the show a few times, and he had posted about your book.
That's great.
And so I was able then, of course, to get the book to read it, and then after reading it, I knew I wanted to be able to have a conversation with you. I mean, are you still having those wow moments, David, as you kind of see how this book is being received, especially because it is your debut book?
Yeah, I am. I mean, it's been a very unusual debut book for me, I think, debut book in general, because it's gotten a lot of attention, and the rollout has been very unusual. I think a lot of times when people have their first book, it can be very quiet, and so I've been very fortunate in that there's been a lot of discussion about my book, and it's been received pretty positively, you know. And like I just, as we're talking, I actually just got back from Texas from a really great book festival for tweens called Tweens Read, which was amazing. But just a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm around books. And so if I sound a little groggy today, it's because I'm just kind of recovering from all that, coming back from all that excitement over the past few days. But yeah, no, I mean. Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I've been lucky enough to receive 6-star reviews, and just like I said, talking with a lot of the people who have read it and talking. You know, there was one young man I met a few days ago who stood up in the auditorium, and a young African American male, and was just talking about how the book had really affected his life. You know, and he was I guess like around 13 or 14, and had been going through some issues, and so I guess he found the Stars Beneath Our Feet very helpful for what he was going through. So just, you know, he actually almost made me cry, you know, just because of the sentiment, and got a chance to talk with him afterward. But it's very rewarding to talk to people and kids about how the book has affected them.
Right, exactly. And, you know, it has to be good, too, to know, I mean, there's so much symbolism, I feel like, in the book, around what the main character is going through, David, as well as, I think, things that are so easy to relate to. And I'm sure that's probably one of the reasons why those young and you know, young at heart are able to read this book and to kind of see a part of themselves as well. Could you have imagined when you were creating these characters, though, that it would have the impact and the reach that it's having?
No, not. I mean, I was once I completed writing the novel, I was satisfied with it, you know. And I thought that it would be well received, but you know, like I said, I wasn't really expecting the type of reception or rollout that it has received thus far, you know. So,
right.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Yeah. And then for those who are just now hearing about the book, The Stars Beneath Our Feet, as I mentioned, the main character's name is Lolly or Lawless. We're able to see him being called in the book. But also, it has to do with creativity. I think that's a big part. I mean, that is one of the big things I think that comes around. I think any creative individual will appreciate this book because we all try to use our gift or what we have, I think, to be able to either to bring attention to things, to be able to, showcase different things in the world. Is that kind of how you see your gift of writing, David, being able to do that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a very creative person. I consider myself a storyteller. In addition to writing, I'm also a filmmaker and have some experience in photography. So they're all kind of forms of storytelling. It just depends upon what medium you use, right? But growing up, one of the things that I have in common with my central character, Lolly Rockpaw, in the book, is that we were both very creative kids, and so, when I was Lolly's age and much younger, I was always kind of dreaming up stories for different comic strips that I was working on, and eventually that evolved into like little bits of dialogue and evolved into short stories and finally now novels, and even some screenplays along the way. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of that, I mean, there's Lolly is a character who is kind of born and raised in Harlem and lives in public housing in Harlem, right? And I was born and raised in Missouri, so we're different in that regard. But, I lived and worked in Harlem for a long time. I live in New York now. And so, I got a chance to meet and work with and live beside a lot of people like Lolly, in Harlem. And so, there are some similarities and some differences in our stories, but that theme of kind of creativity is definitely one that kind of is that we both share, and something I really hold dear. It's some of the times when I go on these trips to talk to different schools around the country, I'll wear a Willy Wonka T-shirt from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka, the film, right? The Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka, and part of that is just because that whole theme of imagination from that film and also the book, of just creativity and using creativity as a tool to kind of build ourselves out of whatever predicaments that we might be in and make build better lives for ourselves. I really, that's something I feel very strongly about and something I live by.
Right. Well, one of the other things that we see in the book with Lolly, and since you brought up parallels, David, I'll ask you about this, is that Lolly's mom would challenge him. They would have, what they call, the reading challenges, the story challenges, where they're able to kind of, be able to take a story out of their head and to be able to share it. I mean, what was it like for you to kind of bring out, and did you find that you also found a connection with that, being able to share stories that way?
You mean if I had grown up with something similar, you mean? Or
right, exactly.
Well, no, my parents did not do that, the story challenge thing with me. And that's something I kind of came up with. I was trying to think of, Lolly is such a creative child. And so both of his parents, in the book, I'd wanted to show like kind of where the roots of that creativity came from, and so his mother is somewhat eclectic. She collects Pez dispensers, and, she's a big reader, as my own mother was in real life. My mother was a big reader. She loved horror novels and mystery novels, and in the book, Lolly's father is he works in construction, but he's also like a part-time clown on the weekends, so it's both of his parents are a little different, in some regards, So I basically wanted to kind of show where that came from. In my own life, my grandmother and my mother were both avid readers. My grandmother had a little library in her home, and some of my earliest memories of literature and reading actually come from my grandmother. She used to love Paddington Bear. Who, that's kind of one of my earliest literary memories is of Paddington Bear. And my grandmother also introduced me to comics, really. She bought me the Smithsonian collection of comic strip art, rather, when I was very young. And I still have to this day. It's sitting on my bookshelf here in Brooklyn. It's a huge volume of comic strips. And, and I'm a big comic book fan and geek right now, So there in my family, there were lots of introductions to reading and kind of creativity that I think kind of pushed me in that direction. As you kind of see in The Stars Beneath Our Feet, Lolly gets kind of pushed and pulled in that direction himself.
Right, exactly. We're going to talk more about that. I want to say, for those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're excited to welcome David Barclay Moore to our program today. We're discussing not only about his own experience with his debut novel, The Stars Beneath Our Feet, but what it's been like for him to see the response to the main character and the story that he's able to kind of weave throughout this book. Now, Lolly has, some great moments, as I was just touching on. Of course, he also has some tragic moments that readers will find in the book, even some funny relationship that are in the book as well. But he's not alone in that. There's another character that I mentioned to you before we began the segment, David, the character Rose, who also knows what it's like to lose, what it's like to feel lost, and to kind of make sense of it all through what's around them. And I think that's kind of part of the Legos connection they're able to find as well. What was that like for you to have as a theme in the book, the idea of love and loss and how you move forward?
Well, I think it's crucial to the novel, and the novel is kind of born out of a lot of those emotions and those experiences. It's The Stars Beneath Our Feet is actually dedicated to my own brother, Brian, who passed away about 6 years ago. And I was the youngest in my family. Brian was the next oldest, and we were very, very, very close. And my brother Brian died of cancer. When we first encounter Lolly's character in my novel, he's kind of reeling from the death of his brother, Jermaine, who was basically murdered in gun violence in New York City. And so a lot of those emotions that I experienced and dealt with after my brother Brian passed away kind of become infused into the novel. My own kind of process of grieving and dealing with grief kind of wind up in the book. So a lot of Lolly's emotions in the book are kind of reflections of some of what I experienced, and also Rose too, the character Rose, who is kind of a crucial character to Lolly's kind of journey. And Rose is a peer of Lolly, and they start off kind of rough, but eventually, they kind of wind up basically kind of helping one another kind of get through this whole rough patch that they're going through, And Rose is a really favorite character of mine that I've created. She's on the autism spectrum, and a young black girl living in the public housing with Lolly. And, we don't normally see like a lot of, I think, autism as it appears within the African American community. I think it's there, but we don't usually see like young black girls. And just kind of, when I was in college, I actually worked in a program briefly in which I worked with people who were on the spectrum, and it was a very rewarding experience for me. It's something that I've never forgotten, and it's one of the reasons why it's kind of popped up in The Stars Beneath Our Feet. And another reason is that I actually worked for a brief period at an autism agency here in New York City in communications. So,
okay.
It's just it was a very special experience and something I wanted to kind of build into the book.
Gotcha. And another thing that we're able to see, though, even though there are challenges, even though there is tragedy, as I was mentioning, there also is a constant message of hope, of overcoming. And even if it's something simple as Lolly and the others trying to move past a challenge, or to try to get over a challenge that they're going through. That is something. The idea of being able to create something from nothing. I think that imagery is great in the book, using Legos to be able to do that. But there's also a great line that is in the book that we're able to hear in Lally's voice as he's talking about his father and where they are at this particular time. And basically, Lally said himself, and then, of course, to us, maybe my space stories weren't just a bunch of stories after all. Maybe I could predict the future or help create it. Is that one of the things that you hope that especially young readers take away from this book, David, that they can be instrumental in the future that they want for themselves?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Life can be challenging, particularly for young folks. Our young people have a lot to deal with, and some things are out of their control. Most things, we have a hand in, I believe. When I go around the country talking to groups of young people, one of the themes of my talks is this whole idea of bad choices versus good choices, And, life, and I try to tell them life is challenging enough without, making it more difficult for yourself. So to, choose wisely, think about your choices, which is also a theme in the novel where Lally and his best friend Vega in the novel are have to face some really challenging, tough decisions that are presented to them based on where they live and how they live, So yeah, that's one of the things. I think there's lots of lessons to learn from the novel. A major one is that whole thing of I think the last line or one of the last lines in the book is our choices can become our lives, and that's something that I really believe very strongly in. That the decisions we make really can determine our future. Of course, there's some things, like I said, that are that we can't affect, but there's a surprising amount of direction in our lives that we have a hand in.
Right. I think the other thing about, and people can tell, I think, from the cover of the book, David, of course, the idea of Legos, and Legos, again, having such a strong impact in this book, really being almost a character in themselves, is that being able to build something, as I mentioned earlier, from nothing, or to be able to build something from what you have, is that also something that you try to live by, to be able to use the tools at your disposal to be able to create what you want?
Yeah, it is. I'm in the business of creating worlds, so I can't help but be involved in that. And meaning that I dream up. I have the pleasure and the good fortune to be able to dream up worlds and people and create characters out of my imagination and make a living at it. So it's a wonderful thing. And within the book, as you pointed out, the Legos are a fairly obvious metaphor for that, where, Lally really truly does build himself out of his predicament, and by, he starts building a whole Lego world, in his community center where he lives, and he does this in conjunction with another character, and together the two of them kind of work themselves out of the kind of negative space that they're in, and the whole process of that allows them to see other options that they haven't seen before, right? That's one of the things about art, and it's really sad that art has been taken out of our public schools so much. When I was younger, it was much larger part of my education, and nowadays it's just as we all know, it's art classes and schools are just really becoming fewer and far between. But one of the things about art that's very powerful is its ability to affect how we view the world, and that's what happens to my character Lally when he starts. Basically, he becomes an artist, basically, like a Lego artist. And for a while, he doesn't know whether or not he is an artist or not because he's working with Legos. And he's is this art? Is it not art? And eventually, he determines that this is what he wants to do. This is what he wants his life to be, something which he's creating things, which he's building positive things, telling his own stories out of his imagination. So, but, there's been lots of studies about art and just working with art and how it actually really does affect the kind of pattern of our brain waves, and just working with that. And, so it's a very powerful thing that I'd like to see kind of develop more, and particularly within the African American community. I think it's really crucial to give kids another option, to kind of see the world differently and build better worlds for themselves.
Right. Exactly. And I think that is the thing, to let them know that is definitely possible for them. And I think that's one of the things the books definitely reminds them of. Again, everyone, David Barclay Moore has been our guest. Great conversation with you, David. The new book is called The Stars Beneath Our Feet. It's available through our partners at Amazon.com or through your favorite bookstore. If they don't have it, they'd be more than happy to order it for you. You all can definitely stay connected with David as well. He has a website, davidbarclaymore.com, or he is all over social media. You can find him at dbarclaymore is where you all can find him there, especially on Twitter and Instagram as well. David, really look forward to speaking with you again, and it goes without saying, there's always an open invitation for you.
Oh, well, I'd love to come back, and thank you, Cyrus, for this and all the work that you do. And like I said, I look forward to talking to you again, and thank you for letting me spread the word about the stars beneath our feet. It's something that's very, very special to me.
Okay, glad to do it. And we definitely thank your audience for tuning in to this edition of Conversations Live. If you all came in late, you missed part of the conversation with David, don't worry. Thanks to our online friends, you all can catch the replay right after we go off the air. The link is already available through our social media site. So head over to Facebook.com/Cyrus Webb or go over to Twitter.com/Cyrus Webb. If you click on the link there, you can listen to the show completely for free and share it with your friends from there too. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Make sure you take out time to enjoy some good music as well as a great book. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live today. You all make it a great one.